We've got some breaking news that we want to bring you this hour. We're just hearing that Dr. Nandipha Magudumana intends to approach the Constitutional Court to challenge an earlier failed appeal bid against her extradition from Tanzania. She's applied for leave to appeal against the judgment, which was handed down by the Supreme Court of Appeal just last month. Magudumana is challenging the grounds on which she was brought back to South Africa following her arrest, alongside her alleged lover, Thabo Bester, who she's accused of helping to break out of prison. He was already serving a sentence for rape and murder. They fled to Tanzania after being discovered, or in Johannesburg, in fact. It was said that Bester had faked his death in a fire at the Mangaung Correctional Centre. Let's bring in SABC News international editor Sophie Mukwena, who's just been watching this news just in. Sophie, let's start first with the grounds for Magudumana now intending to approach the Constitutional Court. On what basis is she going to the Apex Court?
I think you would recall that when they were arrested in Tanzania, there was a process to ensure that they are brought back into South Africa. And at that time, the Department of Home Affairs, International Relations, and the police were involved. Now, South Africa and Tanzania has got an extradition agreement, or they also subscribe to the treaty that deals with extradition in the SADC region. And therefore, Magudumana is arguing that her being brought back to South Africa was not procedural. But we know that what happened at that time, the Department of Home Affairs, the police, including the Department of International Relations, met their Tanzanian counterpart to work on the extradition process. And therefore, that's what the state has been arguing. On the other hand, that's what the Constitutional Court will be dealing with, because the Supreme Court does agree with the state that that process was handled in a proper way. It is legitimate, and also the extradition treaty was followed. But Magudumana doesn't agree. You know that in South Africa, the highest court in the land is the Constitutional Court, and therefore any citizen is allowed to take the matter to the highest court in the land. However, the argument must also include the constitutional gravitas or points in terms of what you will be arguing there. And therefore, this is where the matter is. But we'll get more clarity tomorrow. Our team will be speaking to experts and also speaking to the legal team of Magudumana to look at what will be the argument at the Constitutional Court.
And at this early stage, indications are that she's going to rely, in part in her argument, on the fact that the Supreme Court of Appeal, in reaching its decision to kick out her attempt to overturn the extradition, was not unanimous. So the judges weren't fully in agreement who had heard the matter. But it also is another delay, right, in a court finally pronouncing on the merits of the issue, the reasons why she and Bester were arrested and brought back to South Africa from Tanzania. The actual trial is yet to go ahead.
Yes, the actual trial is yet to go ahead. But remember, any person in South Africa who's aggrieved has a right to use all the avenues available those avenues that are at the disposal for her or him to be able to argue his case. And in this case, this is the process that they've taken for now, and using the High Court and then moving to the Supreme Court and now finally to the Constitutional Court, which will be the end of this argument in terms of the extradition.
And just lastly then, Sophie, as you were saying, we're going to hear more detail we're expecting in the coming hours as the teams also follow this matter. But it'll be interesting because ultimately Magudumana had basically accused the Tanzanians, another country, of colluding with South African authorities to bring her back here. And I'm curious about whether the Tanzanians, as we wait to see, if they would want any involvement perhaps to clear themselves on that score.
The Tanzanians will have to provide information in terms of confirming that their processes were followed in Tanzania. But as I pointed out, at that time, there was a team that was sent to Tanzania, and that team stayed for almost 5 days working with their counterparts in Tanzania, and those were the Department of International Relations, Home Affairs, and the police, engaging their Tanzanian counterparts. You'd recall that our reporter at that time, Isaac Lukando, and Daniel Kijo followed that story in Tanzania, and therefore I think the authorities in Tanzania will provide information in terms of processes followed in Tanzania in relation to the extradition agreement and treaties, including the laws of that country when you engage in extradition or sending a person back who is not desirable in your country.
SABC News international editor Sophie Mukwena bringing us an update on what is breaking news this evening. Confirmation that the disgraced Dr. Nandipha Magudumana now intends to approach the Apex Court, that's the Constitutional Court, after she failed to convince the Supreme Court of Appeal that her extradition back from Tanzania, which was on the run with convicted rapist and murderer Thabo Bester, was done unlawfully. Interesting that this is happening when the trial against the two is expected to begin just next month in July and continue until September in the High Court in the Free State. But as Sophie was saying then, our teams in the Free State and here in Johannesburg will continue to keep you across all the various developments in this matter. We'll hopefully also be able to get you word from the NPA regarding its next move, now that we've got confirmation that Dr. Nandipha Magudumana intends to go to the Constitutional Court to fight her extradition from Tanzania, which she's basically termed an abduction.